he had called his friend just 3 days earlier. Well, Ban Ki-moon, the UN chief, also urged the UN to act right away and gave some harrowing details of the violence.
Estimates indicate that more than 1,000 people have been killed. The eastern part of the country is reported to be under the control of opposition elements who have taken over arms and ammunition from weapon depot. There are daily clashes in at least 3 cities near Tripoli. The streets of the capital are largely deserted. People cannot leave their houses for fear of being shot by government forces or militias. Colonel Gaddafi's supporters are reportedly conducting house-by-house searches and arrests. According to some reports, they have even gone into hospitals to kill wounded opponents.
Well, our correspondent Scott Heidel has been following the events at the UN. Here's the latest from the headquarters in New York.
After a briefing by Secretary General Ban Ki-moon of just how dire the situation is in Libya, the Security Council also heard an emotional plea from the Libyan ambassador to the United Nations. That is when there was a draft resolution floated to be reviewed by the members. It was drafted by the United Kingdom and France, and in that resolution it calls for a referral to the International Criminal Court for possible crimes against humanity. There's an arms embargo and a travel ban for Gaddafi's inner circle. Now, this resolution, a draft resolution, is going to be looked at again by a special session Saturday by the Security Council, and all indications are right now that it's expected to pass. Now, it has broad appeal, and that's not just from Western nations. There has been a unified voice of the international community that something needs to be done in Libya, and it appears as though Saturday is possibly when the Security Council will actually do something.
Let's take a quick look at the sanctions that are being proposed against Gaddafi's regime by Washington. The U.S. is planning to freeze the assets held inside America by Libya's leader and his 4 children. And all U.S. banks have been put on notice for any sudden movement of funds from Libya. And all U.S. military assistance will now be cut off. These measures coming just shortly after the United States had finally managed to get the last of its people out of the country. Now, moving on, an attack in Iraq on the country's largest oil refinery has managed to shut that refinery down. Officials say unknown gunmen burst into the Beiji plant, which is 180 kilometers north of Baghdad, shooting dead staff and planting bombs. Jane Araf is live in Iraq's capital, Baghdad, with more on this. Jane, what's the latest?
Tamor, it's a serious security breach at one of Iraq's biggest oil installations. This time it's not the oil fields, it's not the pipelines. It is the biggest refinery, the one that takes in crude oil and puts out gasoline and other essential items. And we spoke to the deputy director of the refinery, and he tells us that at about 4 this morning, gunmen actually infiltrated part of the refinery, laying bombs in key areas, including the control room, and detonating them. He says one chemical engineer died because of smoke inhalation. And as those gunmen left, and they were equipped with silencers, they sprayed the building with gunfire, seriously injuring another employee. He says staff are afraid to come back, and they're working not just on the repairs, but on shoring up that security that allowed them to infiltrate. Tamor?
Jane, the way you're describing it, it sounds like an extremely well-planned and professional operation.
It does. It's quite chilling. It's not the usual attack we've come to expect where there's murder and mayhem and indiscriminate killing. This seemed to be very carefully planned out. They entered the building, according to the deputy manager, without the protection facility service attached to the Interior Ministry actually noticing that they were in the building. And when there, they seemed to make a point of actually putting those bombs where they would inflict the most damage. But the damage, of course, is also to the confidence of the people who work there. The deputy director says it could be some weeks before they're back at work.
All right, Jane Araf live in Baghdad. Thanks, Jane. Let's get to Saad Al-Fatih, an oil expert and a former advisor to Iraq's oil industry. He's also a former head of the energy studies at OPEC and joins us live from Dubai. Mr. Fati, thank you for being with us. Just quickly, what do you think the implications of this are, the shutting down of Iraq's biggest refinery?
Well, as you say, it is the biggest refinery, and actually it supplies almost half the petroleum products to the country at this point in time, and therefore it is very significant indeed.
Is this a particularly important factor on the global oil markets? I mean, Iraq's contribution to global oil supply over the past 6 or 7 years has been fairly minimal, but people have been putting a lot of faith in the fact that the country can ramp up its production fairly sharply now.
Well, I think its biggest implication is on the local market to start with, and it will have no implication on Iraq's ability to export oil. On the contrary, the exports from Iraq may increase a little bit because this refinery is now down.
That's the particular significance of this one event, though. If we can look at the broader context, as Jane was saying to us there, this looks like a well-planned operation by people who want to disrupt the oil industry in Iraq. Now, with the international community already seeing oil above $100 a barrel, with so much emphasis being placed on Iraqi supplies, and the government there, as you know, increasing its estimates of Iraqi supply by 30% only a couple of months ago. What is the future going to look like? Because if we have a concerted campaign by professional people to disrupt that supply, it could have major implications down the road, couldn't it?
Oh yes, indeed. You know, I mean, this has to be viewed in context of what is happening in Iraq with the protests that are going on in many cities, and this is the first effect on the oil industry. So it could happen somewhere else, and this calls for a quick resolution to what is going on in Iraq, to answer the queries of people. Thousands of people are on the street in order to avoid horrible things like this incident in Beiji.
Just very quickly, that increase in Iraq by its estimated oil supplies, recoverable supplies a couple of months ago, they suddenly said, oh look, we've discovered 30% more than we thought we had. How credible was that move, do you think?
Well, I mean, we could talk at length about this thing, you know. I mean, we have no way of verifying any government's claim, whether it is in Iraq or somewhere else, about what they discover and what they don't discover. So, I mean, we have to take it at face value, which is what's happening all over the world.
All right, and what we're seeing right now all over the region is worrying the market, it seems, quite a lot. What do you think the oil price future is going to look like amidst all of this?
Well, I mean, if this violence continues across the region, and if it involves other producing countries, then it will affect the market significantly. The market is already at a high price, which is unjustified by supply and demand balances or by any other factor in the oil industry and the international market. Therefore, I'm afraid the political situation in the region is going to be significant in the evolution of prices in the next a few weeks or months.
Saadallah Fati in Dubai. Thank you for talking to us. Now, still to come on the programme, we'll have a report from our correspondent inside Libya with the latest that's happening there. Plus, engineering a state, how southern Sudan is to go about creating jobs for its citizens. And find out why this popular creature failed to become Russia's Olympic mascot.